Introduction to Playwriting. State Standard HS1.T.CR1.A. Create roles, imagined worlds, and improvised stories in a theatrical work. And HS1.T.CR2.A. Collaborate with peers as the actor, director, playwright, designer, etc. in preparing or devising a theatrical work. This project is a collaborative project. You are going to be working with your peers to create an original play based on original characters that you generate. This may be the first time you've ever collaborated on any kind of creative writing before. So it's important to go over some basics before you get started. First of all, you're going to have to come up with an idea. So where does a playwright get inspiration? Well, the answer is from almost anywhere. Playwrights can be inspired by stories from their childhood, personal experiences, events in the news, an interesting person on the street, a picture, literally anything. The first impulse to write a play is called the germinal idea, or the seed. The idea takes root in the playwright's mind just like a seed in the ground, and the rest of the play grows from that central idea. Sometimes it's easy to tell what the germinal idea was based on the final product, and sometimes not. Think about it. To look at an acorn, would you ever imagine that an oak tree would grow out of something that small? Miss Street is an award-winning playwright. When I set out to write my play, Grand Finale, I was really angry. I had just been to a funeral that had gone horribly. None of the mourners showed the body any respect. The preacher had obviously never met the deceased person. The body was dressed in a terrible, tacky outfit. And despite the fact that I didn't know the deceased individual all that well, he was someone who had been important to my dad. So it infuriated me that people were showing that amount of disrespect. I had to do something about how I was feeling, so I decided to turn my experience into a play. That play went on to win an award, and because of that play, I got to travel around the country to places like Washington, D.C. and Las Vegas, all because one time I got mad at a funeral. That feeling became the seed that I planted in my mind that eventually grew into my play Grand Finale. Once you've got the idea, the next thing that you're going to have to decide with your writing partners is how to put the story together, how to structure the play. The best way to get started is to use our good old friend, the plot triangle. Begin by giving the audience some exposition. What does the audience need to know about these characters and their situation? Then create an inciting incident. What makes today different from every other day for these characters? What is the event that makes the rest of the story happen? In the rising action portion, you can create a series of problems for your characters to solve on their journey. During the climax, your protagonist is going to face off against your antagonist, or your hero is going to meet their biggest obstacle. And finally, you've got to come up with an ending. Either the hero is going to get what they want, or the protagonist is going to get what they want. And remember, protagonist and hero are not necessarily the same thing. Or they're going to fail in achieving their goal. Regardless, you have to pick one and then wrap the story up from there. So let's come up with an example play that you might write following this structure. The character that I have created is a superhero with ice powers. That's something that my audience is going to need to know pretty early on, so I should include some information in my exposition in my first page or so, telling the audience that my character is a superhero who has ice powers. It's helpful to give your character a goal and some obstacles. I'm going to give my character the goal of buying his first car. Today is special because today is the last shift that he has to work at his restaurant job before he'll have enough tip money saved up to buy his car. But of course, every good superhero story needs a supervillain. So one of the major obstacles for my character is going to be that he has to defeat the villain quickly, otherwise he's going to miss his shift. So for this story, maybe the inciting incident is my superhero sees the villain kidnap a baby. He wants to defeat the villain quickly, save the baby, get it home, and make it to work on time so that he can get his last tip money to get his car. My rising action are going to be all of the times he tries to defeat the villain. Maybe he starts by calling into work and seeing if he can switch to a later shift, and his boss says no. That's a complication in our rising action that's going to lead to ultimately facing off with the villain at the climax. Another piece of rising action could be taking a cab to get to where the villain is because he doesn't have a car and he's an ice powers superhero, so he can't fly. We should also see him making a plan for how he's going to rescue the baby. Those 3 things would form the rising action of my play. Finally, my superhero has to face off against the supervillain. That's the climax. Is he going to defeat the villain, rescue the baby, and make it to work on time? Or is he going to lose to the villain, not save the baby, and miss his shift? It's up to me to decide. I want this play to have a happy ending, so I'm going to say that my superhero defeats the villain, saves the baby, and makes it to work on time. For the resolution of my play, I'm going to have my superhero put on his work uniform and walk into the restaurant with a big smile on his face. And it's really that simple. Most plays and books and movies start out as a simple idea and then get structured along something like the plot triangle. One of the best pieces of writing advice I have ever been given is this: the best words you will ever write are buried underneath all of the crappy words you haven't written yet. Which is to say, don't be afraid to be bad. Just start writing. That blank page can be terribly intimidating. Kill that emptiness by putting literally anything on the first page. Maybe it's a sentence about what the play will be about, a character's name, anything, and then just keep going. It doesn't have to be good. Get all of the bad out of the way. Get all of the crummy ideas onto the page. You can delete them later. Which brings us to number 2. Don't be afraid to make changes. Just because you write something down doesn't mean it has to stay on the page or in the story forever. The first draft of a play is never going to make the playwright happy. Neither will the second. Plays are a unique form of literature in that they keep getting rewritten as long as the playwright is alive. So if something doesn't sit right with you, change it. And number 3, understand that you don't have to write things in order. There is no rule that says you have to start writing your play at the beginning. In fact, it can be very helpful to write your play out of order or even backwards. Personally, I like to start with the climax of the play. Write that scene out so I know what my characters are headed towards. You might like to start at the end, at the beginning, at a random point in the middle. There's no wrong place to start writing as long as you do, in fact, start writing. You are going to begin by creating a character. You can make up any kind of character you like as long as this character is school appropriate. Please refrain from creating characters who deal in drugs or traffic and sex work. Once you have completed the details for your character, you will be assigned to a group with other students, and you will combine your characters in a play where all of these characters must interact with one another. Remember, the best words you will ever write are hidden under all the crappy words you haven't written yet. So I guess that means it's time to get to work.